Hello, everyone. Welcome to a book-based interview where today we talk to author Alex Kenna. Alex is a prosecutor who released her debut mystery novel, What Meets the Eye, in 2022 and was met with positive reception, earning achievements like being a finalist for the Seamus Award. Recently, she has released the successor to her first book, Burn This Night, in November, and as someone that's read the book, I can personally give it two thumbs up. Alex, thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Of course, of course. And at any time, if you guys are interested in following Alex Kenna after this interview, please check out her Instagram at Alex Kenna Books. But yeah, just to get started with the interview, I guess the first question I love asking authors is to pretty much get an idea of what pretty much made you want to be an author. Was it hard juggling that journey with your profession? Because I also did some research on you, and I know that you're also a prosecutor, I believe.
Yeah, I'm a prosecutor in my day job. So I guess getting started in writing, I started out as a painter. I went to art school before law school. And then when I was thinking about having kids, I wanted to kind of switch and do a different type of creative outlet because oil paint is really toxic.
Mm.
And I was a really messy painter. It would look like a toddler trying to eat by the end of it with things smeared all over the place. So I started thinking about writing fiction. And I guess before that, I guess I kind of got into writing just from doing art reviews. I did like art criticism on a blog and a couple guest pieces in various places. So I kind of had the bug. And then one day I just, started writing a novel and it kind of took off from there. But, in terms of balancing things, it's definitely a hustle. 'Cause I
Mm.
got two kids, I'm a prosecutor and try to find time to write. So, when people ask about time management, I always just, my biggest advice is let your house go to hell. Honestly, just keep the cleaning to a minimum, and
Right.
all the chores to a minimum. Laundry can wait, and you have to kind of squeeze time in when it's there, even if it's in 20-minute increments, because it's definitely a challenge.
Absolutely, absolutely. Um, I guess this is just me being curious, but since you're an art major and stuff, do you have a preferred art style or a medium that you like painting with or just creating art with? Or do you have a favorite type of art? Because I remember in high school, I took an AP European art history class and I had to go to the Getty Museum here in Los Angeles. And I remember seeing so many paintings ranging from like the Renaissance days all the way up to modernism. And I was just curious, like, what is your journey in the art world like? Do you paint often, or are you more of a researcher? Like, you love studying art? Like, what is your experience with art?
Yeah, well, I majored in painting and art history, so I painting is oil paint was definitely my medium,
Cool.
and I probably I honestly I like all of it. When I'm lucky enough to live in Los Angeles, so we have all kinds of wonderful museums like the Getty that we can check out. And I grew up in Washington D.C. where I had the Smithsonian,
Oh,
which was
wow.
free on top of everything. So I was exposed to a lot of different things, but modern. I'm more of a modern art girl.
Cool.
Not necessarily abstract as much, but
Hmm.
other stuff, and German expressionism, the Bay Area figure painters, and I used to paint all the time, but unfortunately it's been a little while just between working and writing and having kids. It's more on it's more an aspiration at this point to try to find a way to get back to it, but hopefully things will slow down at some point and I'll be able to.
Yeah, absolutely. When it comes to your novels, I guess it's like a couple parted question, but take it how you will. The first question I wanted to ask was why mystery novels? And I was wondering if your experience as a prosecutor kind of helped lend a hand in helping you create these rich stories. And then on top of that, were these stories that you kind of had in your mind the whole time? Or was it one of those things where once you decided you wanted to be an author, you would brainstorm and then you started thinking about the whole story of Burn This Night, or even before that, What Meets the Eye?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of why mysteries, part of it was just that I do work in criminal law, so that's kind
Mm.
of the background that I have. And What Meets the Eye is set in the art world, so that was kind of a way to combine, the two sides of my background. And I drew a lot about some of the experiences that I had before I went to law school. So mysteries with it was kind of just a natural fit, and just I've always been drawn. I didn't really start reading mysteries until I started thinking about writing them, but I used to be a true crime fanatic. And I
Wow.
would kind of read all, and at first I would watch mysteries and I would binge on true crime. And for whatever reason, the tiny, switch in my brain of, you should probably, reading mysteries would be interesting just didn't go off until my 30s. But it's kind of what I'm interested in reading for the most part, and it's what I'm interested in writing. I think the other part of your question was just about story ideas.
Yeah.
Yeah, sometimes you get little you it's kind of been different for every project. So, sometimes you I've gone to a place and it's just, you get a sense of something has to happen here. Like there's recently we went hiking in Chantry Flats, which is in the mountains near Sierra Madre, and there's this pack station where they have a bar with all these mules, and it's really charming and amazing, and they have all these 100-year-old cabins, and we were walking around, and I kept thinking I have to kill someone here. It just has to happen. So sometimes you go somewhere, like I'm dying to kill someone at a racetrack. I've been working on some project with that, and sometimes you just go to a place and you think, wow, this would be amazing. Or for my first book, I got really interested in art forgery,
Hmm.
and in part because I used to binge. There's this really nerdy British show called Fake or Fortune, and people think that they have a masterpiece, and either it is or they have nothing, and the stakes are really high, and it gets very nerdy. But I got totally into the weeds of watching this and thinking about this, and then going to the art museum, and sometimes when you're a huge art nerd, sometimes you see a painting and you think, I'm reading the label, but I'm not buying it.
Right.
I'm wondering if maybe this isn't so real. So I wanted to kind of build a story around that idea. And my second book, it was more just locational. We ended up staying in this beautiful small town, and I wanted to find a way to kill someone there. And I had this idea just of these three siblings, where one of them, Jacob, he destroys his mind with meth. Which is something I see a lot in the court systems in LA, and having these two siblings or sisters, who react in completely different ways, and one totally distances herself, the other one kind of tries to save him, and in kind of a misguided effort. But I wanted to kind of those. I had that idea of the siblings, and I was in love with this small town where we ended up staying, and I just kind of built the story around trying to marry those two ideas together.
I think it's really interesting how you blend your profession with your passion with your writing, because I think it kind of adds another level of authenticity to the work that you're creating. I feel like if you were to make a book on something that you don't have any idea of, I still think you can make an amazing book regardless, but I think you get an extra oomph to it when you already are passionate about something like art. You have your job experience being a prosecutor, so you understand crime, and then you also love true crime, and you kind of merge that into your stories. And I think that helps create another level of atmosphere and even world building. I think in general, the characters feel more fleshed out, and I think it's really cool how you travel with your family and you also think about, would I kill someone here, or is this even? It kind of reminds me of Dexter, how like to solve crime you have to be a murderer yourself or something, but you're doing it as an author where you're using your locations, your experience, and even your passions, even whether it's related to writing or not, you're still able to kind of merge those worlds together. And I think that's really important for especially startup writers, or like startup big authors are just beginning to write. I think a lot of the times people sometimes think that the best idea is the one that makes the biggest boom, or is the one that has the craziest plot. But I think if you stay really true to your core, I think it really helps you develop a lot of better stories and even like deeper connections with some of the characters you create. So I really appreciate your answer. And on top of that, I used to love the show Unsolved Mysteries. I'm a huge true crime junkie myself. Like, I remember on Netflix when the Richard Ramirez Night Stalker documentary came out, I
Hmm.
watched it, and that was the first time I legit was scared the night when I was sleeping after watching it, because I was like, wait, this is LA. Like, of course, like, we're here in LA. Like, this is really weird. But for Unsolved Mysteries, I remember I used to get really paranoid because if my mom or my sister didn't pick up the call once, I'm like, oh, okay, they got him. Like something
Yeah.
bad just happened. So I get the addiction of just true crime and stuff, because there is really an interesting element to just seeing the psyche and the psychological aspect of like how everything happens. And I think you really capture that as well with the detective Kate, where she's going around trying to piece it backwards, and you meet different people and you see different things that kind of help you lead to the mystery, to help you understand exactly what's happening. But as we lead into your novel, Burned This Night, first of all, I think it's an amazing book. I want to say great job job. I think it was really
Thank you.
cool. Yeah, of course. But I do realize that this book focuses a lot on the theme of identity, whether it's through finding out who your family is or even trying to find your path amongst the chaos that you may find in life. How did you go about developing Kate's character as she deals with her ongoing case while going about her personal life? Because I felt like there was a really strong attachment to, in the book at least, like, as a reader, you read it and you really understand who Kate is as she's going about her life and as she's also going about the mystery. But there are moments where I kind of felt like, wow, like, there really is a lot of detail in juggling that life. And I was wondering if that is something that you just, if that relates to what you brought up before with you juggling your profession and your home life, or is this something that you've seen maybe around you as you're being a prosecutor and you see other people being like workaholics, but they also are trying to juggle like their personal life as well?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's definitely just in the modern world, if if you're working with kids, there's going to be a lot of juggling. Yeah, so for Kate, her backstory is in a nutshell. Basically, she was an LAPD officer, ended up was in a devastating car accident, and ended up getting addicted to pain pills. Went out on disability, ended up basically losing custody of her daughter, and then is hung up a shingle as a private detective, and is kind of working to try to get custody of her daughter back. So and for Burn This Night, she discovers very early in the book, basically, that the man who raised her wasn't her biological father, and goes through a bit of a head trip for that, and basically at the same time learns that she's distantly related to a cold case killer. And so she kind of starts looking. She's her search for solving this cold case is kind of inextricably linked to her search for her genetic father. But and part of it, I think, is as a writer, I've always been interested in people who go through huge transitions, or who've lived a lot of different lives. Like, even just meeting people. You hear somebody used to be, if I meet someone who's like, oh yeah, that time when I was a fisherman, and then I became a circus performer, and then I was a burlesque dancer. I'm always like, oh, tell me more. um, you know, it's like, I we put a lot of value, I think, in our focus, I think, in our society, but there's something fascinating about people who just kind of live a bunch of different lives and go along for the adventure. So for her, I wanted to have somebody who was in this point of transition, who basically had to totally rebuild her identity, and who really identified as a cop, really identified as a mother. And I mean, obviously she still is one of those things, but she's rethinking who she is and trying to create a new normal. And I wanted to kind of build tension by putting this person who through this a bit of a head trip. And one of the other things I was thinking about her is, I think, when a lot of times, if you're coming up with a character who's a little bit tormented, and I think she's low grade functional tormented. um, you know I think a big pitfall is to give somebody a backstory of something bad happened and that's it. But that's not really how life works. It's not, oh, this terrible thing happened to me when I was 17, and it's the only bad thing that ever happened, and all my troubles are because of this one bad thing that happened when I was 17. Like, people have lots of problems.
Right.
People who have a devastating problem, other things happen, and then good things happen, and there's a lot of layers
Mm-hmm.
to a character. So that was the other thing I was thinking about with her. I wanted lots of layers to her to make her more realistic. Like, she's a mother, she's got ADD, she's an ex cop, she's trying to figure out who her biological father is, but she's still missing the man who raised her, who she was very close to. And she kind of has a lot of different things that are going on at the same time. And I wanted to kind of put that in to make her feel more like a three-dimensional person, rather than just an architect of a strong detective, or the architect of like a messy female character, or anything like that, but more like she's a person, and she has different aspects to her character.
Right, and I think Kate is definitely a three-dimensional character. I think it shows in the way that not only does she think about her job and her profession, but the way that she tries to relate with everybody that she meets with, whether it's her family or friends or even strangers. And I think, going back to what you were saying about tormented characters, I really think the three-dimensional aspect comes in when you try to develop what happens after the torment. I think there's a lot of authors, and we've had history, like in history, we had so many writers that talk about characters that are tormented, and that torment leads to chaos, where they're kind of lost in that void and they're really hard to come out of it. But for Kate, it's a struggle for self forgiveness, I feel like, where it's a little bit of, yeah, these things happened to me, but that doesn't mean that my future can't also be better than what my past was. And I think not only was it, I could imagine it being hard to write as an author because you have to make that genuine, because if you're going to create characters like Kate, you have to make it feel authentic when she does decide to give something a chance, even though maybe her past trauma makes her want to stop like going for it. And I think it was really cool how that journey of self discovery really showed in Kate, because I think it's really relatable, especially in today's world where life could just be messy sometimes, especially like when you're younger, you're trying to find out who you are. And, maybe you do make mistakes where it's like you do think, for example, you go to college, you major in something, and you realize your passion is completely the opposite of what you majored in. And you kind of have this feeling where it's like, oh, I put so much work into it. I feel like I should just suck it up and just keep on going in that direction that initially went on. But with self forgiveness comes this idea of exploration, where you end up allowing yourself to kind of focus on the other facets of your life, and you end up realizing you like some more than others. And I really enjoy how Kate kind of shows that struggle, but there are examples in the book where you do kind of see that transition where it's a little bit of a back and forth, where it's like, hey, you know what, I'm gonna go for it. I don't care because I want this, and I'm gonna go for it. And I really appreciate that. um Another character that I really appreciated was Jacob. And while he does seem to make questionable choices throughout the book, you can't help but feel a sense of awe as you see how authentic his character is as he tries to understand his life. Were there any inspirations in your life to help create Jacob's personality and his story? Because I know you talk about Jacob, and you talked about the whole addiction aspect, and I feel like it's really easy to make the stereotypical meth head or just drug addict where they're just crazy, there's no sympathy in them, they're just void and they just want drugs or whatever. But you kind of had a different take with, I feel like, with building that relationship with Jacob, and I just wanted to ask if you can go more on that. Yeah.
Yeah, so Jacob, he is this basically. Kate ends up solving or investigating two different murders. One is this cold case, and the other is an arson murder that happened in the same small town where Jacob, and he's a mentally ill man, is accused of setting a fire that killed one of his sisters. And so for Jacob, one story that I wanted to tell is something that we see all the time in the court system in Los Angeles is basically meth induced brain damage,
Mm-hmm.
where it doesn't get a lot of press attention, especially because fentanyl is so deadly and meth is not deadly in the same way that fentanyl is. But the modern meth is incredibly potent, and you have a lot of incidents of irreversible brain damage, people developing characteristics of schizophrenia, with no family history of it, just from meth use. And it was something I'm in a different position now, but I used to be a DA, and I would see it all the time. You'd see it coming. You'd read police reports where people did completely insane things, and it was almost like you'd be saying meth in your head, and that's what basically was the trigger for it. And there were you just see certain characteristics over and over again. And so I had that kind of in my mind, and also just the tragedy of the families who sit by it and see this happening to their loved one who's going down this rabbit hole. And I had a lot of that in my mind. I know somebody who succumbed to meth addiction, who was very, very devastatingly affected by it, who was also a bit of an inspiration for that character. But I wanted to make sure, like you said, it wasn't just basically portraying them as a kind of a one-dimensional monster, and I didn't want to write the character in a way that would create stigma. So Jacob does some terrible things, but he has pangs of conscience, and he ends up unfortunately in this cycle where he's kind of tormented by the meth causes him to do some terrible things, he ends up kind of tormented by the things that he does, and deals with that with more meth, and his brain kind of deteriorates as the book goes on. So yeah, it was kind of a story that I really wanted to tell, and I wanted to build it into kind of a mystery where Jacob, he's one of basically three main characters whose voices you hear in the story, because if you I think if you write a whole book on just that story, it's just too depressing.
Hmm.
You like I think I don't especially people people want to escape a little bit even if you're when they're reading you want some entertainment. You don't want a book where you're reading 40 chapters of tragedy. So I wanted to be able to give myself the space to kind of tell that story and get dark and bring some authenticity to it, but I think sometimes a little bit goes a long way. So by I kind of wove it in there too with other things, where maybe if there's a sad Jacob chapter, maybe there's a happy chapter after that, so it's doesn't become just kind of overwhelmingly dark.
Yeah, no, I think you did a really great job with that because just speaking from my personal experience, I used to work for a nonprofit medical clinic that would serve the homeless population, and Jacob's story is very common in when I through my experience when I was working at the front desk. A lot of patients would come in, and right away it's the same thing where like you read the papers and you get this idea like, okay, I know what the trigger is, for some of the things that you see like on their body, like they might have marks on them, or they may be just talking about like really crazy things, and it's really easy for you to be like, oh my god, this person must be using, or just be doing like a really bad behavior. But then you take a moment to start asking the small questions and you get to understand this person more, and it humanizes the situation. And I think that's a really noble thing that you're doing with your work, which is promoting the idea that drug addiction isn't the problem. It's usually the void that drug addiction tries to kind of fill in that person. And I think a lot of people sometimes, when they see somebody that's using or is unfortunately like succumbing to drugs and stuff, I think it's really easy for somebody to say, don't talk to that person, push them away, like let's just isolate them and never think about them again. But I don't think that's the true answer, and I really think that it's really sweet how in this story, with Jacob at least, there are moments where yeah, he does do some really crazy things, but then you also see moments where, like you were talking about, whether it's through his memories or through his present self, you see how his family and his good side, like the things that ever came to him in a, like for example, like his family, like the way that they would approach him sometimes and take care of him and stuff. Like you never got the vibe that Jacob didn't have anybody. Like there were people, and it's really nice to see Jacob reach out, even in moments where, like, yeah, it didn't end the best. You still see Jacob trying, and I think that's really important. It's a really great story to share, and I'm really glad that Jacob kind of encompasses that, because that was my favorite character reading the book, because I think you see one chapter of Jacob and you're like, oh, okay, like he for example, he's working, like, okay, he has a job, that's really great, awesome. Another chapter, he's bonding with his family, that's really amazing. And then another chapter just goes crazy and you're like, wait a minute, like what happened? And I really like how the time skip also allows that moment for you to like kind of fill in the blanks, to help you understand that this guy isn't just a typical like, oh, I did this, I did that, and then it kind of just goes in this linear path. Yours is a little bit more branched out, where it's kind of like, okay, put in the pieces, try to understand not only the mystery in the story, but how do these people essentially become mysteries themselves? Like, how do you understand these people and what they did and who they are? And I think that dynamic is really great. Yeah, another question, and I think this is really fun because yeah, I did do some research. I know that you're a painter, but how has your love for art helped you create your stories? I know you said that what meets the eye is that blend, but has that connection to art? Did that help Burn This Night in any way, or has that influenced like other books in the future you plan on writing, or just other stories? Like, is how has your love for art helped with that?
Yeah, I mean, it's helped in a lot of ways. I mean, I will say I have a one character who's like a chainsaw artist in this book. It's kind of a not the main focus of that character, but I think yeah, what meets the eye. I mean, there's a lot of stuff. I had my artist character and that was thinking about different ways to make modern art that was very based on just experiences in art school and different things that I'd seen. But I think even just my approach to writing is I kind of took a lot from learning how to paint, because I went to art school, and you think about how to kind of create a work of art that's gonna work. And when you first start drawing, you might focus on one thing at a time, and all of a sudden you've drawn this very realistic human face. Then you suddenly remember that, oh, but you have to fill up the whole canvas, and things end up getting very uneven. And you kind of learn how to build something together, and you do the outline and kind of, make sure that everything is working together and that you have kind of a harmonious whole. And so I kind of tried to bring that idea when I was starting to write, where you can't, because I think when you first delve into fiction, it's kind of the same thing where I think a lot of us, we end up over polishing the first, two chapters to death,
Yeah.
and then wanting to make them perfect before moving on, and then either you just never end up progressing in the book, or you write 5 chapters and they're perfect, but you realize there's not enough to really there's not enough there to finish the book, or maybe you end up with a finished product that's very uneven, and you have kind of an over polished beginning, and the end is kind of sketchy. So I try to bring that idea of working on the book as a whole, and then kind of going back and editing as a whole into it. And I think my approach to research is probably very informed from just working as a painter, because as a painter, you don't necessarily try to make things perfectly realistic, but you need to kind of look at things in order to get ideas for little quirks that can make a painting more interesting,
Got it.
if that makes sense. So
Yeah.
you might not, you might be painting, if it's a still life, you want all the objects in front of you, and maybe you're going to mess with the colors, maybe you're going to mess with the shape, but you're going to have a richer finished product if you're looking at something real, so that you can add more little quirks that you wouldn't necessarily have thought of. And I kind of try to bring that same idea into writing, where I don't think everything has to be things don't have to be exact. Like my book is set in, I changed the name of a town so that I could make little changes here and there, and is you know it's I didn't want to be kind of constrained by trying to make everything exactly the way the town looks. But if I just kind of tried to write a generic fictional town without looking at a real place, I think you would lose a lot of color, and that you'd lose a lot of those details. You wouldn't have those little quirks. You wouldn't have a sense of, like, how does the air smell, and what does this part of it look like? What is the architecture? And so that idea of kind of looking at something real and paying attention to the details, while also giving yourself the freedom to make changes, is something that I really borrowed from art school.
Wow, that's amazing. I think, especially as someone that also writes, like, I'm definitely not as good as you. I'm definitely still working on it. But I think it's really cool how you bring up your past passions and the work ethic and just your detail, your attention to detail, and everything that you've learned from your ability to just love art and everything. You transfer that all the way to your writing skills, and I think it's really cool how you talk about that, because I feel like for a lot of people that want to write, they always ask themselves, like, how do I become a good author? How do I write? How do I create the best book? But in reality, there's not really a guideline for it. The way it works is that you just start and you see where it goes. And I think the best tool that you can use to help you get there is by using the skill set that you have acquired previously. Like, I think you brought up your experience of being a prosecutor, and how has that helped you create, like, the Burn This Night and just other detective books. But then you also bring up your situation with art and your love for art and your passion, and it goes more than just, yeah, what meets the eye is focused on like a art centered plot, but then you're talking about different things. Like, for example, I do notice when you do talk about the city and the town and even the characters' actions, it's very detailed, and it's cool to see that you got that from your passion with art. And I hope that other people, if they do try writing or they do try creating their own stories, they use the skill sets they've already acquired through other passions and they just apply it to writing. And I'm pretty sure a lot of people will be surprised with the stuff that they can create. I think it's a beautiful thing, and I really appreciate you giving us that answer. I really like that. Uh,
Thank you.
of course, of course. So we're almost done with this interview, but the second to last question is, what's in the future for Alex Kenna? Do we sense another Detective Kate story, or could it be something different? Have you also considered wanting to partake in other genres, or will it always be mysteries? I'm just curious, because I know that, this is your second book, and I know that you're probably thinking about so many things right now, but I was just wondering, like, what's the farthest, like, thing that you've thought about where you're like, oh, I gotta try this at some point. We'll just see.
Yeah, well, I'm right. Right now, I'm working on two standalones. One is set in the horse racing world, because I live right by a racetrack,
Oh.
and the other is set in the Los Angeles court system, because it's in a courthouse where I worked for 3 years.
Hmm.
So yeah, it's again where lots of details come up, like dead cockroaches everywhere. But so yeah, I'm working on those right now. I'm hoping to go back to Kate at some point. Is I like her as a character, and there's other stories that I want to tell. Also, I want to give her a happy ending at some point because she deserves it.
Oh yeah,
Um,
she's worked way too hard for it. That poor girl. I was reading the book and there's some moments where I'm like, give her a break.
yeah, it's I know I torture her a lot. I torture her in book one too, but yeah. So at some point I'll probably go back and try to give her a happy ending. But right now I'm working on the standalones, and in terms of the farthest afield, I have a couple ideas for children's books
Oh,
because I have a 3.5 year old. Although I'm not really sure how to pitch that from a marketing standpoint. If I say I usually write about murder, but now I want to write female children, so that's probably more in the distant future if it happens at all.
no, that's awesome. That's great. I think it'd be really cool to read the LA court story that you're writing because I feel like there's so many things that you can talk about with that, especially with just the diverse population we have here on this side. I think there's so many stories that are only in courthouses. I feel like some people only hear, and I think it'd be great to like hear some of those stories or just to like just have something that kind of symbolizes just the journey of like what prosecutors go through or even like what some of the people go through as they walk into the courthouse, needing help or just any other form of assistance. But yeah, I think the children book will be cool as well. But definitely don't pitch the murder part. Maybe put that after, like,
Yeah,
oh,
no
I
one's
write
gonna
other
die.
books. Right, right. No one's gonna die in this one. Everybody lives. But that's awesome. And I guess the last question kind of goes back to us as a company. So BookBase is really centered around promoting the social aspect of reading, and I know we've talked to you about this before, but BookBase's job is to pretty much create virtual book club chats that kind of make up for the lack of physical book club chats that people might not have. So I know, like for example, me being in the MBA program, I was really hard for me to juggle like my school life, my social life, and then also going out of my way to read a book, meet up with people. And there was moments where I definitely didn't think I wanted to do something like that. And but what happened is I made a book club in my MBA program with my two friends, and that's how it ended up becoming a blend of me being able to juggle my school life and me being also being able to read a book and enjoy it with friends. And I also learned so much from just reading with other people and just capturing that experience of like, oh my god, did you read that chapter? Like, did you know this person went through that? But I just wanted to ask you in your personal experience. I know you're clearly a reader. Like I see the bookshelf behind you. By the way, really cool collection. I think that's awesome. But
Thanks.
what do you think is important about socializing around books of any medium? And I also wanted to ask, did you ever grow up talking to people about books, or were you ever part of a book club? This is just something that I was just curious about.
I've never been part of a book club. I did grow up thinking a lot about books. My dad used to sell modern first editions
Oh,
for a
cool.
while, and that was really fun because we would go to like estate sales, and I was a little preteen looking at jewelry, and my dad would be trying to find interesting books. So I grew up around books. Both my parents are readers. And my now I'm not in a book club, but my husband is like a complete book addict. Like when we moved here from Philadelphia, and we had 36 boxes of just his books, and it's exploded from there. So but it is a great way to connect to people. It's just you end up talking about things that you wouldn't otherwise. You end up talking about themes that affect everybody, and that you read about in fiction or nonfiction, but don't really necessarily come up in regular conversation. And people bring in aspects of their own life when they're talking, and their own experience when they're talking about books. I've had people reach out to me and tell me that they read my book, and that they had learned that one of their parents wasn't their parent, and that aspect resonated with them. I've had people reach out to me talking about you know the the addiction storyline in my book resonated with them. But I think just as a social aspect, it's so important to get people talking about things, get people to know each other a little bit on a different level, and it's just a way to bring people closer.
No, that's amazing. Wow, that's cool. That's cool how your dad used to sell modern first edition. That's really cool. And I've never been to a state sale like that to like kind of see like how people sell books and like that. But that's awesome. I know when I go to Barnes and Nobles, I see like their editions of like their classical stories and like has really nice covers and stuff. Man, if I had the way I would empty that store if I just had a big wall, I would just be like, I want this one, I want that one. There's just so many cool like just renditions of just books out out there. I just think that's awesome how you grew up seeing that, and I think it's great that you have a really gigantic, and your husband has a really good gigantic book collection. I know mine's building right now. I actually need to get a bookshelf to put in the house because it's getting to the point where one sofa is just covered in books. I just need to move all of that. So that's really great to hear that you also have a great collection, and also just hear like your thoughts on socializing around books. And I think it's great that your stories have resonated with people because it definitely resonated with me. I don't think, especially as someone that doesn't really have the closest connection to somebody that struggles with addiction or somebody that is in the detective world, but reading that story, it makes me want to hear other stories like that because I do think there's something important between the lines of these characters and the way that they go about their life. And I think it just creates a very humanistic approach in being able to deal with people. Always try your best to not judge a book by its cover. Always try to understand where this person's coming from, and I think it definitely helps create better bonds with like people in general. But yeah, thank you so much for this interview, Alex Kenna. This has been amazing. I just wanted to say again before we end that at any point, if you guys are curious about Alex Kenna's books and you want to follow her, please check out her Instagram at Alex Kenna Books, and please read her book Burn This Night. It came out in November, and her other book What Meets the Eye. But yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you.